You'll know the other story, though, that we've been getting into, and the organisation we've been looking at for some time and trying to get onto the platform for some time, is the Disinformation Project. In fact, the organisation that led me to somewhat cynically, or perhaps what would we call sarcastically, name my program the Information Project. And yesterday, or this week, we have laid out a new government tender which seems designed to funnel money to Kate Hanna, the head of the Disinformation Project, your money, so that they can continue their odd campaign against the truth in New Zealand. Well, we had Jonathan Ailing on yesterday, and many people were impressed, as they often are, by Jonathan's pronouncements on free speech. And he made mention of retired Judge David Harvey, who has written and penned a number of articles about disinformation or the Disinformation Project, published on Substack. I'm hoping to talk him into letting me publish some of those on the platform today. But he joins us by video link now. David, welcome to the platform. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Sean. Pleasure to be here.
David, just firstly, before we begin, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a retired judge.
That's right.
Okay. What sort of law were you, or what sort of judging did you do?
I was judge of the district court for about 30 years.
All right. And why the interest, or have you always had an interest in free speech?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Age 17, Thomas Jefferson Memorial, Washington, D.C. I have sworn eternal hostility to any form of tyranny over the mind of man. It's sort of stuck with me and has remained there ever since.
All right, so I know where you're coming from now. That is great. Well, tell us why you've been writing and been interested in the Disinformation Project.
Okay. I taught law and IT at Auckland Law for some time. I've always been interested in IT. That led into an interest in communications. I co-wrote a text on media law. My text on internet law is in its 5th edition. I've been interested in the wider area of communications and particularly in free speech. So when the Disinformation Project came along and when the whole business started to open up at the beginning of COVID-19, I thought, well, this is interesting. I wonder where it's going to go. And that's what sparked the interest. And I've been thinking about it and writing about it ever since.
Mm-hmm. Are you, and let's just, I'm putting my finger in the air to see which way the wind's blowing for you. Do you think the Disinformation Project is a good thing? Do you think it does good and vital work in this democracy?
If it did its work properly, it would.
Okay. How doesn't it do its work properly?
Because there's insufficient rigour in the way in which they do their research, the way in which they present it. And that's been the subject of the series of articles that I've published on Substack.
Mm. What is non-rigorous?
Myself,
but in a broad sense, in a broad sense, what's not rigorous about it?
Well, there's a whole lot of things. The first thing that we've got to start with is a pronouncement Kate Hanna made back in 2017 about the way in which she approached research. And that is that she approaches it from, as she put it, a Marxist, feminist, post-colonial perspective. And that informs all of her thinking and all of her writing. And she's acknowledged that. That is summed up as what's called critical theory. And critical theory approaches problems in a particular way. Now, I'm not going to knock critical theory as a philosophy. It's out there, it happens. It's just the thing is that we've got to recognize it. So when you see stuff coming out of the Disinformation Project, you've got to realize that it looks at the world through the lens of critical theory. And consequently, you've got to recognize that and weigh it in the balance as to whether or not you think that it's reliable information.
Does that critical theory, does that apply to all staff of the Disinformation Project? Is it universal?
Well, given that they all put their names to the papers, and you've got Kate, Hannah, Dr. Hadutawa, and Kylie, I've forgotten her last name now, given that they put their names to it, they've signed off on it, and the critical theory approach is apparent when you read what they put out. In Kate Hannah's second paper, which is on the Disinformation Project website, which was delivered to a security conference, I think, down in Wellington, the whole opening of the speech or the paper that she delivered was pure critical theory. It was, blaming everything, post-colonialism, the whole lot. So, when you read that, you think, well, okay, that's fair enough. I'll weigh that in the reliability balance as to whether or not I'm prepared to accept it, because in some respects, critical theory ignores reality.
All right. Given that critical theory is the ideology on which the Disinformation Project is based, and it would seem to me what drives it, and I'm going to take your research as being deeper than mine will ever be on this topic. Does that feed through and make the methodology and the reporting of the phenomena that are claimed by the Disinformation Project purely ideologically driven, in other words, not scientific?
Well, it's not scientific, but for a number of other reasons. The first thing is that if you're going to be talking about phenomena that take place, you should be making reference to the particular, in this case, websites that you've been to. Now, what happens is that in papers they say we surveyed 127 Telegram websites. Now, they don't give the addresses. They don't give the people or the particular feeds that they were looking at. There is absolutely no way that an independent observer has of verifying the information that they put out. So that's a methodological problem from the word go. There's no way of verification. The second thing, that the approach is anything else but objective. And Kate Hannah, once again, has acknowledged that she engages emotionally with her data. Now, a proper researcher doesn't do that. You just follow the evidence to where it leads and you end up at a destination. But no, they are emotionally invested in their topic. So that takes away the advantage of objectivity that is so important if you are putting out information that is going to have implications for freedom of expression.
So there's no science here then, Ian. They are almost, David, there's no science here. They are almost what when I first came across them, called the thought police. Is that a fair description of them?
That's a little bit. No, it's a bit strong. Okay, let me give you my perspective on it, Sean. This may surprise you.
Yep.
I have no problem with the Disinformation Project's right to say anything they like.
No, me neither.
That's what free speech is all about. Okay, so they can put their stuff out there. What I'm saying is, and what my research has led me to, and this is where the evidence took me, was look at their stuff critically, weigh it in the balance, ascribe to it what sort of reliability you'd like. My own view, and this is a personal opinion, is that they have some issues about what I would view as proper free speech approaches. And that's really my thing about the Disinformation Project. No, they don't use controls. For example, they might say, we studied 127 Telegram sites and so on and so forth. Okay, what happened to all of the other information that was out there? If they're talking about disinformation coming through on Facebook sites, what about all the other Facebook sites? What sort of proportion of Facebook sites are promulgating disinformation compared with everything else? And you'd find that it's really fractional.
Yeah.
And
Look, the other thing,
there's not a control.
David, the other thing I don't like about them is they play favourites. They will not be interviewed. They will not allow you to critique them or engage in free speech with them. They have never appeared on this show. They do not invite me to the seminars. And I'm sorry, I think they get a horribly free run from our mainstream media, who do not talk to people like you or critique their work in anywhere the level they should. I want to move on to the story that we looked at.
Mainstream media is another ball game entirely.
What was that? Sorry? David?
The way the mainstream media treats them is another ball game entirely.
Okay, well, what do you think of that? Seeing we've mentioned it. What do you think of the free run, I would argue, they get from TVNZ, Radio New Zealand, the Herald, Stuff, News Hub, and the rest of the pearl clutches?
The journos don't ask the hard questions. The first question that I would like to see answered is, where do they get their funding from? And of course, with this new initiative from the DPMC, that answer could well come through fairly shortly. But that would be the first question. The second question is, who's gone through their stuff and analysed it? A retired guy with nothing better to do with his time has done that for them.
And a bloody good job you've done, Sue. But they don't want to know because they're just the experts, and we've decided to make them the experts. And they provide headlines and they make us feel comfortable in our sort of woke ideology. So why would a mainstream journalist, bother asking any questions?
Well, two things. The first thing is that mainstream media is invested in being the purveyors of truth. You can rely on mainstream media to tell the story as it is, the plain, unvarnished facts, and so on and so forth. They're invested in that particular thing. The second thing is a question of perception, and this I emphasise this as perception, and that is that when you have received $53 million of government money to put out the truth, the perception is that you've been bought and sold. Now, I don't believe for one moment that is the reality, but it is a question of optics. How does it look when all of that money has been funneled into mainstream media, and your ordinary citizen is going to say, well, maybe that's why they're not asking the hard questions of the Disinformation Project, because the Disinformation Project is saying what the government wants it to say.
Yeah. David, what have you been able to establish about who set up and funds the Disinformation Project?
It was a part of a University of Auckland think tank, if I can put it that way, called Te Pūnaha Matatini, that was the recipient of a large amount of government funding, because at the time, and this is beginning of 2020, the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet made it clear that they wanted there to be a visible gap between the messaging as far as COVID-19 was concerned and government policy. And you can understand that. So you get Te Pūnaha Matatini with Shendi and Susie Wiles, and also the Disinformation Project, who were all part of that umbrella, who were looking at getting the messaging out about COVID-19. Susie Wiles and Hendy would hand out the medical facts and so on and so forth. The Disinformation Project would identify, and I use that word advisedly, disinformation about COVID-19. No actual specific examples were given in any of the papers that they did.
So this was all part, and it is on the record, and I know the stuff you're talking about. The Disinformation Project was a government-funded, and I'm going to use the term because I think it's appropriate, a government-funded propaganda organisation.
You might say that, Sean. I can't possibly.
Well, I can. Well, yes, you can. You're set up, paid for by the government to represent yourself as not being the government and spread a point of view or expound point of views that are the government's. That is propaganda. Right? Oh, is he gone? Is he gone?
I've lost you.
No, no, you're back now. Right. All right. I say it is, and we know now the Origin's a government-funded organisation to start with. We look at this tender that's come out of the DPMC. I've had a couple of people insist to me, oh, no, anyone can apply for that funding. It looks like simply we need to get another contract to Kate and her mates, doesn't it? It looks like this is handwritten for the Disinformation Project, this $500,000 or so funding.
It is. It looks that way because in a paper that they published in August of last year, they made a number of recommendations. And one of their recommendations was that there should be an independent research organisation based on civil society and separate from the government that should consider and make recommendations about disinformation, which in a nutshell is pretty much what the DPMC has put out for tender. Now, I had a look at those tender documents, and there is absolutely no way that an individual is going to be able to tender to do that work. They are looking at institutions. They are looking at institutions that have got some kind of backing or something of that nature. So you're looking primarily at research organisations or university-based organisations that will be tendering for that particular contract. And the disinformation is one of those.
Yeah, well, mind you, it's very hard to establish right now who they are working with and which university they're connected to. It's all very fuzzy.
Oh, it is. They're no longer with Te Pūnaha Matatini. So the question falls to be asked, who are they with? It may well be that they've got private funding or something of that nature, or it may well be that there's some government funding that is coming through a number of channels and is reaching them. I do not know, and that's the problem, and nobody's asking those questions.
Yeah. Well, Ian, you are, and we have been. We just cannot get anything. And Kate Hanna has told us she doesn't believe the Disinformation Project is subject to the Official Information Act. I don't know if they get this funding, if they would be or not. I don't know what level of control or authority they would have. Ian, have you yet been accused of being a racist, post-colonial, white, hegemonic rapist or not, given your attitudes here? Because you're a sitter. You're a sitter for your criticisms being dealt with in that manner.
Okay.
You haven't yet?
No, nobody's...
Yeah.
Nobody's had a go at me on Twitter, and they haven't left unpleasant messages on my Substack feed. They haven't dropped unpleasant articles in my mailbox if they knew where that was. And I don't have a cordon of security guards going with me every time I go down to the supermarket. So I don't. Yeah, if a person wants to say that, hey, they're entitled to express their opinion. It'll probably be disinformation, but there it is.
Yeah. Finally, and you said if they did their job properly, this might be a good organisation, but they don't do their job properly.
Yep.
I think they are the thought police. I think many people do. I don't think they engage in civic debate and discussion in good faith. I think they, behind their backs, accuse people of terrible things which are not true, including my organisation, The Platform, which I know has been referred to in documents they've been involved in as part of a web of disinformation when we are anything but. But given that they don't do their job properly, given that they are ideologically driven by critical theory, do we need them? And should we be paying them the amount of attention, particularly our mainstream media do?
Mainstream media should be a lot more critical of them. They should be subjected to a considerable amount more scrutiny. And when that's done, then the question of whether or not they serve any sort of useful purpose will probably be answered.
Yeah.
My conclusion on them is treat what they say with a certain amount of care and caution. Yeah. Because, as you say, it's ideologically driven, it's emotive, It uses all sorts of buzzwords and so on and so forth, and there is an absence of verifiable evidence.
Yeah.
And hey, look, I've dealt with evidence all of my life, and that's what I look for. And quite frankly, Sean, I can't find any at the moment.
David, for people who do want you to read your stuff on Substack, what's your handle there? How do people get to it, David?
It's a Halfling's View. If you Google a Halfling's View Substack, you'll get to it.
And I'm going to ask you, I'll put it on to you live. Can we republish?
Halflings are hobbits.
Yeah, can we that's what I thought. Can we republish, David, some of your stuff on the platform, would you mind? And link through to your Substack?
Go for your life.
Great. We just got some new content up. Look, David, I've really enjoyed the conversation today, largely because you have been analytical and in some ways dispassionate, and we've looked at facts. And unfortunately, I think they stack up to a sorry story, but of course that's me being emotive, isn't it? So, David, I hope to talk to you again and read more of your stuff in the future. I thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Sean. Pleasure talking to you.
Cheers.
Have a good day.
That is former Judge David Harvey, The Halfling's View on Substack. We're going to get his stuff up. And he's just had a look at the origins and the practices of the Disinformation Project. And boy, funny, he sees exactly what we see, doesn't he? And that the government's trying to find a job for Kate Hannah, who admits to being a sort of Marxist feminist ideologue. Wow, this is a nice feedback. Awesome interview. Thanks. Finally, the Marxist ideology behind woke is being discussed. See James Lindsay speech to the European Parliament about critical theory. He's not Ian Taylor. No, that was my brain fart. Yes, David, not Ian. We've got that. And we got through David. And that was because Ian Taylor we had, and I maybe got Ian Taylor in the back of my mind. How utterly shocking that the Disinformation Project proponents take a critical theory view of the world. These people are the enemy within. Sean, I heard you refer to experts. Ek is an unknown quantity and spurt is a drip under pressure. That is from John in Whanganui. Yeah, I have read David Harvey's Substack's extremely good analysis. Here they are.